Hello everybody, welcome. Thank you for being here today, especially to listen to this talk about such a lesser known, let's say, type of ecosystem. Aparna's work, of course, and you'll see some of it in the movie, and we're going to speak about it as well. But let me put some context to what we are trying to do here. So, the film you're going to see is part of a 100-film series that the Habitats Trust is producing for local biodiversity in Maharashtra. So what we usually see is we see big mammals a lot, right? There are so many movies about tigers, elephants, rhinos. Very rarely do we see films about pangolins, otters, plant species, flowers. Very rarely do we see this. And an idea for the entire series came about from that how do we make people look at the small things and perhaps things that are largely to our eye invisible. And then, so that's how this whole series started. The Sadas are an interesting ecosystem in many ways. Some of it we'll see through the film and through a conversation with Aparna. So what we'll do is we'll see a film. It's a small film. There are two of them, and they are from the same landscape. So you'll pretty much see similar people talking about the ecosystem in both these films, but there's a reason for that. So after you finish both films, we'll discuss. Okay? That sounds good? Say yes.
पावसाच्या आगमनानंतर रत्नागिरीतील राजापूरच्या कातळ सड्यांवर कोकणची ही लावण्यवती वनस्पती डोलताना दिसते. सुसाट वाऱ्याच्या तालावर थिरकणारी ही वनस्पती म्हणजे मोठे पानतिळवण. जगात केवळ रत्नागिरी आणि सिंधुदुर्ग जिल्ह्यातील काही भागातच केवळ पावसाळी महिन्यांपुरताच ही वनस्पती फुलते. कोकणी माणसाने खास आपल्या बोलीभाषेत या वनस्पतीला दिलेलं नाव म्हणजे कापरे कमळ. वाऱ्याने अंगात शिरशिरी भरून थरथर कापणारे म्हणून कापरे आणि कमळाच्या कुळातील नसूनही गुलाबी कमळासारखे देखणे म्हणून कमळ अशा अर्थाने या वनस्पतीचे नामकरण केलेलं असावं. कोकणातील किनारपट्टी लगतच्या पठारांवर म्हणजेच सड्यांवर पावसाळ्यात बहरणारी ही पाणथळ वनस्पती असून वनस्पती विश्वात तिचा शोध 2016 सालीच लागलाय.
कोरिअँडरमध्ये तुम्ही ज्यावेळेला त्या पॉन्डला व्हिजिट द्याल त्यावेळेला संपूर्ण पॉन्ड असं पिंक दिसत असते आणि फुलं तुम्ही जर जवळून पाहिलं वाऱ्याच्या झोताबरोबर जो स्टॅमेनचा पुकेशरचा जो डान्स आहे तो अतिशय लोभनीय असतोय. त्याची जे फिलामेंट्स असतात ती लॉंग असतात आणि ते त्याच्याभोवती ज्यावेळेला डान्स करत असतात तर याच्यामध्ये सेंट्रलला फक्त एकच गायनोसियम असते आणि त्याच्याभोवती डान्स करणारे 75 ते 250 पुकेशर असतात आणि तो डान्स बघताना जो स्वर्गीय आनंद आपल्याला मिळतो तो मी कुठल्याही इतर फुलामध्ये पाहिलेला नाही.
पावसाच्या जोरदार सरी सड्यांवरील उथळ भागात पाण्याचा संचय करतात. त्यामुळे पाण्याची छोटी छोटी तळी तयार होतात. अशा तळ्यांमध्ये जीवसृष्टी नांदू लागते. कोकणातील राजापूर आणि देवगड तालुक्यातील किनारपट्टी लगतच्या सड्यांवरील ही तळी जुलै महिन्यात पानतिळवणाच्या फुलांनी बहरून जातात. 2014 साली प्राध्यापक डॉक्टर अरुण चांदोरे जैतापूरच्या सड्यावर अभ्यासाकरता गेले होते. त्यावेळी त्यांना साधारण 1 एकरावर पसरलेल्या तळ्यामध्ये गुलाबी रंगाची फुलं दिसली. ही फुलं क्लिओम चिलेडोनी या प्रजातीशी साधर्म्य साधत असल्याने त्यांनी ज्येष्ठ वनस्पती शास्त्रज्ञ डॉक्टर श्रीरंग यादव यांना मार्गदर्शनासाठी बोलावलं आणि अभ्यासाअंती ही प्रजात नवीन असल्याचं समजलं.
याचं जे फूल आहे ते जवळजवळ 1 ते 1.5 इंच डायमीटरचं असतं आणि याच्यामध्ये स्टॅमेन जे आहेत ते 75 ते 250 स्टॅमेन असतात. पुकेशर 250 आणि जो क्लिओम चिलेडोनी आहे त्याच्यामध्ये 30 ते 40 स्टॅमेन असतात आणि फुलं जास्तीत जास्त पाऊंड्स इंच मोठी असतात आणि त्यामुळं बाकीचे अनेक फरक आहेत आणि हा स्पेसिस क्लिओम चिलेडोनी म्हणून सर्वांनी ओळखला, चुकीचा ओळखला आणि नंतर आम्ही तो नवीन स्पेसिस डिस्क्राईब केला आणि त्याला नावही दिलं आहे कोरिअँड्रा इलिगन्स.
पानतिळवणाच्या या वनस्पतीला इंग्रजीमधील सर्वसाधारण नाव एलिगंट स्पायडर फ्लावर असं आहे. गवळणींच्या घोळक्यात कृष्ण मधोमध उभा राहून बासरी वाजवतोय आणि त्याच्याभोवती असंख्य गवळणी नाचतायत असं या वनस्पतीच्या फुलाचं वर्णन या प्रजातीचे संशोधक श्रीरंग यादव करतात. फुलाच्या मधोमध असणारा स्टिग्मा म्हणजे कृष्ण आणि त्याभोवती असणारे पुंकेसर म्हणजेच गवळणी असा त्याचा अर्थ होतो. जून महिन्याच्या शेवटच्या आठवड्यापासून पानतिळवणाची वाढ होण्यास सुरुवात होते. जुलै ऑगस्ट महिन्यात या वनस्पतीला मोठा बहर येतो. ही वनस्पती साधारण 1.5 ते 2 मीटर पर्यंत उंच वाढते. त्याला येणारी फुलं ही सकाळी फुलून दुपारी कोमेजून जातात. भारतात सापडणाऱ्या तिळवणाच्या 17 प्रजातींपैकी पानतिळवणाचे हे फूल सर्वात मोठं आहे. ही फुलं परिपक्व झाल्यानंतर या वनस्पतीवर 8 ते 14 मिलीमीटर लांबीची कॅप्सूल प्रकारातली फळे तयार होतात. या फळांमधून बिया तडकून त्या आजूबाजूला पसरतात आणि पुढच्या पावसाळ्यात पुन्हा रुजतात. शिवाय त्यांचे रायझोम म्हणजेच मूळ खोडही जमिनीत वाढत राहतं.
पॉलिनेशन कसं होतं तर याचे बिटल्स आहेत, हनीबीज आहेत, ह्या ते पॉलिनेट करतात आणि ते ज्या वेळेला त्या फुलावर डान्स करतात तोही अतिशय लोभनीय आहे.
सड्यांवरील पानतिळवणाची तळी ही इतर प्रजातींच्या वाढीबरोबरच अनेक जीवांची आश्रयस्थानं देखील असतात. या तळ्यांमध्ये वाढणारी अशीच एक दुर्मिळ प्रजात म्हणजे नतेशीज केप पॉन्डवीड. या वनस्पतीचा आकार एखाद्या राजहंसासारखा असतो. आजपर्यंत जगात केवळ 4च ठिकाणाहून या प्रजातींची नोंद असल्याने तिला IUCNच्या लाल यादीत संकटग्रस्त प्रजातीचा दर्जा देण्यात आलाय. पानतिळवणाच्या तळ्यांना अनेक जातीचे पक्षी भेट देऊन त्यामध्ये विहार करताना दिसतात. तसेच अनेक जातीचे बेडूक या तळ्यांमध्ये आसऱ्याला असतात. या तळ्यांमध्येच ते आपला वंश वाढवतात. शिवाय अनेक संधिपाद वर्गातील प्राणी हे या तळ्याच्या आसपास वावरताना दिसून येतात. सड्यांवरील या तळ्यांचं मुख्य पर्यावरणीय कार्य म्हणजे पाण्याची साठवणूक. अशा दलदलयुक्त तळ्यांमुळे पावसाचे पाणी हे सड्यांमध्ये जिरतं आणि त्यामुळे भूजलाची पातळी वाढण्यास मदत होते.
सड्याचं पाणी आहे ना, इकडे सडा आहे ना, सड्यावर सपाट भरपूर असल्यामुळे आणि हा सड्याचा मध्यम भाग आहे जो आहे हा थोडा उंच असतो, 2 साईडला थोडा स्लोप होत जातो. त्यामुळे सड्याच्या 2 साईडला 2 गावं आहेत. मग ह्या गावाला सुद्धा पाण्यात इकडून जे पाणी जातं ते खाली सगळे डोंगराला जिरतं. डोंगरातनं पाणी आम्हाला पुढे मे महिन्यापर्यंत सगळं पाणी ते मिळतं. तसंच ह्या साईडचा डोंगर आहे, दोन्ही साईडच्या गावांना हा पाण्याचा पुरवठा सड्याच्या पाण्याचा भरपूर होतो.
सड्यांवरील या पानतिळवणाचा अधिवास आता संकटात सापडलाय. चिरेखाण किंवा वृक्ष लागवडीच्या नावाखाली पानतिळवणाच्या वाढीस पोषक असणारी तळी खणली जात आहेत. त्यामुळे जगात केवळ कोकणात बहरणाऱ्या या सुंदर लावण्यवती वनस्पतीच्या अधिवासावरच घाला घातला जातोय. जगात केवळ रत्नागिरीत सापडणारी पानतिळवणाची ही प्रजात म्हणजे इथल्या किनारपट्टी लगतच्या सड्यांचं वैभव. या सड्यांना असणाऱ्या विविध धोक्यांमुळेच या प्रदेशनिष्ठ वनस्पतीचं संवर्धन करणं ही काळाची गरज बनले. तुम्हाला आमचा हा व्हिडिओ कसा वाटला आम्हाला नक्की कळवा. धन्यवाद. रत्नागिरीच्या कातळ सड्यांवर म्हणजेच पठारांवर पसरलेली ही पांढरी चादर आहे कोकण डिपकाडी या फुलाच्या प्रजातीची. जगात केवळ कोकणात सापडणारी ही प्रजात म्हणजे इथल्या सड्यांचं वैभव. कोकणी माणसांसारखा कणखर वाटणारा जांभा दगडांचा कातळ सडा उन्हाळ्यात निपचिप पडून असतो. विजेच्या कल्लोळाने तो जागा होतो आणि अवचित पावसांच्या तुषारांनी भानावर येतो. अशावेळी पावसाच्या सरी सड्यांच्या पोटात साठवलेल्या कंदवर्गीय वनस्पतींना संजीवनी देतात. जून महिन्याच्या शेवटी कातळ सड्यांच्या हृदयाला छेद देत एक काडी प्रकट होते. ती असते कोकण डिपकाडी. या दीपकळ्यांनी काळा कातळ उजळून निघतो.
डिपकेडी जी वनस्पती आहे ती साधारणतः आपण आस्पारेगीसी फॅमिली म्हणजे शतावरी जी फॅमिली त्याच्यामध्ये तो एक जीनस आहे आणि जगामध्ये त्याच्या 43 प्रजातींचा रिपोर्ट केला गेलेला आहे आणि भारतामध्ये आजपर्यंत 12 प्रजातींचा रिपोर्ट केला गेलेला होता आणि त्याच्यामध्ये 2 व्हरायटीसुद्धा होत्या. म्हणजे 14 टॅक्सा रिपोर्ट केले गेले होतात. आणि गेल्या वर्षीच आपण गुहागरच्या नरवण एरियातनं प्लॅटोवरनं एक नवीन प्रजाती चा शोध लावला. त्याचं नाव आहे डिपकेडी जनाश्रंगे. तर अशा आता भारतामध्ये आपल्या जवळपास 15 प्रजातींचा रिपोर्ट आहे.
महाराष्ट्रात डिपकाडी कुळातील 9 प्रजाती सापडतात. यातील काही प्रजाती समुद्र सपाटीपासून उंचावर असणाऱ्या सह्याद्रीच्या पठारांवर आढळतात, तर काही समुद्री सपाटीपासून कमी उंचावरील कोकणातील किनारपट्टी भागातील सड्यांवर फुलतात. महत्वाचे म्हणजे यातील काही प्रजाती या त्या भूप्रदेशाला प्रदेशनिष्ठ आहेत. उदाहरणार्थ रॉक डिपकाडी ही प्रजात केवळ मुंबईतील संजय गांधी राष्ट्रीय उद्यानात असणाऱ्या कान्हेरी लेण्यांच्या पठारांवर सापडते. तर डिपकार्डी उर्सुले ही प्रजात फक्त सातारा, रत्नागिरी आणि कोल्हापूरच्या काही भागातील उंच पठारांवर आढळते. पर्यावरणीय परिसंस्थेबरोबर स्थानिक समाज जीवनातही या वनस्पतीचा उपयोग होतो.
डिपकॅडीचे बल्ब हे ज्या वेळेला दुष्काळ पडतो त्यावेळेला ते बल्ब गोळा करून खाल्ले जातात आणि राजस्थान किंवा जो डेझर्ट एरिया आहे त्यामध्ये हे अन्न म्हणून वापरलं जातं. तसंच आपल्याकडे डिपकॅडी मायनर, डिपकॅडी मॉन्टॅना आहे. त्याला आम्ही सुईची भाजी म्हणतात. लोक सुईची भाजी म्हणतात आणि ती भाजी अतिशय पौष्टिक असते. ज्यावेळेला ती शिजवली जाते त्याच्यामध्ये अनेक फॅट्स, अनेक घटक आहेत की जे शरीराला पोषक आहेत. म्हणजे संपूर्ण जीनस, सगळे डिपकॅडीचे स्पेसीज आपण खाऊ शकतो.
कोकण किनारपट्टी आणि सह्याद्री पर्वतरांगांच्या मध्यभागी वसलेल्या सड्यांवर फुलणारी शुभ्र वर्णाची डिपकाडीची प्रजात म्हणजे कोकण डिपकाडी. जगामध्ये केवळ कोकणात अतिशय तुरळक ठिकाणी मात्र भरपूर प्रमाणात फुलणाऱ्या या वनस्पतीचं अस्तित्व रत्नागिरी आणि सिंधुदुर्ग जिल्हा मिळून फक्त 25हून अधिक ठिकाणी आहे. साधारण जून महिन्यात या वनस्पतीला एक दांडी येते. मग कळी, फूल, फळ असा तिचा विकास होत जातो. एका दांडीवर सर्वसाधारणपणे 4 फुलं फुलतात. जुलै ते ऑगस्ट महिन्यादरम्यान या वनस्पतीला मोठा फुलोरा येतो आणि काळा कातळ या पांढऱ्या फुलांनी बहरून जातो. या वनस्पतीला येणारे कॅप्सूलसारखे फळ ऑगस्ट महिन्याच्या शेवटच्या आठवड्यात परिपक्व होतं. उन्हामुळे काही दिवसांनी हे फळ तडकून त्यातील बिया या 1 ते 2 फुटांपर्यंत विखुरल्या जातात आणि पुढच्या पावसाळ्यात त्या पुन्हा रुजतात. म्हणूनच आपल्याला सड्यांवर कोकण डिपकाडीचा बहर पाहायला मिळतो.
डिपकॅडी कोंकणेस त्याचं करोला खूप लांब आहे, जवळजवळ 5 सेंटीमीटर लाँग असतो. तर फुलाकडे पाहिल्यानंतर आमच्या बॉटनीच्या दृष्टिकोनातून हे मॉथ पॉलिनेटेड आहे. त्याचं सिंड्रॉम जे आहे ते मॉथ, रात्रीचे जे मॉथ बाहेर पडतात ज्यांचं प्रोबॉसिस 5-6 सेंटीमीटर असतं, ते मॉथ याचं पॉलिनेशन करत असावेत.
रत्नागिरी जिल्ह्यातील लोकजीवनात कोकण डिपकार्डीचे महत्त्व आहे. अनेकदा इथले स्थानिक लोक ही फुलं वेचताना दिसतात. त्यांचे हार आणि गजरे करतात. या वनस्पतीच्या दांडीला येणाऱ्या सुंदर फुलांमुळे तिला बोली भाषेत एक दांडी, गायमुखी, गौरीची फुलं किंवा डोकाची फुलं असं म्हणतात. कोकण डिपकार्डीचं फूल हे सगळ्यात मोठं असलं तरी स्थानिक समाज जीवनातील तरुण पिढीचं या प्रजातीकडे दुर्लक्ष झाल्याचं दिसतं.
आत्ताची जी तरुण ते प्रौढ पिढी आहे यांना याबद्दल तशी काहीच माहिती नाही आहे, कारण ते जे एक असोसिएशन होतं, तो जो एक सहसंबंध होता निसर्ग आणि माणूस यांचा, हा बऱ्यापैकी असा कुठेतरी तुटलेला दिसतो. त्याच्यामुळे या वनस्पतीचं नाव काय, याचे उपयोग काय, असं जर का या पिढीतल्या लोकांना विचारलं तर फार काही आपल्याला माहिती त्यांच्याकडून मिळत नाही. व्हेअरॅज पुढची जी पिढी आहे, एक लहान मुलं आणि महाविद्यालयीन विद्यार्थी, यांच्यामध्ये पुन्हा हा सहसंबंध आणि याच्याबद्दलची उत्सुकता, याच्याबद्दलची माहिती मिळवण्याची उत्सुकता वाढलेली दिसते. कारण कुठेतरी सायंटिफिक पद्धतीने, शास्त्रीय पद्धतीने याचा अभ्यास आणि समाज माध्यमांमधनं त्याचा प्रचार प्रसार पुन्हा सुरू झाल्यामुळे पुन्हा आता तो संबंध कुठेतरी जोडला जातोय, ही स्वागतार्ह गोष्ट आहे.
कोकण डिपकार्डीशी साधर्म्य असणाऱ्या अजून 2 नव्या प्रजाती दरम्यानच्या काळात पश्चिम किनारपट्टी लगतच्या सड्यांवरून शोधण्यात आल्या. त्या म्हणजे डिपकार्डी गोविन्सी आणि डिपकार्डी जनये श्रीरंगी. यापैकी गोविन्सी या प्रजातीचे आढळ क्षेत्र हे गोव्याच्या रिवोणा या परिसरातील सड्यांपुरतेच मर्यादित आहे. तर 2021 साली शोधलेली डिपकार्डी जनये श्रीरंगी ही प्रजात गुहागर तालुक्यातील नरवण गावातील 1 किलोमीटरहून कमी क्षेत्रफळ असलेल्या भागातच सापडते. त्यामुळे तिची संख्या वाढवण्यासाठी या प्रजातीचे संशोधक डॉक्टर अरुण चांदोरे आणि त्यांची टीम विशेष प्रयत्न करत आहे. या प्रजातीचे इतर भागात रोपण करून त्यांची संख्या वाढवण्याचा प्रयत्न आता होतोय. राजापूरसह देवरुखमधील सड्यांवरील वाढते व्यावसायिक बांधकाम आणि मानवी हस्तक्षेपामुळे कोकण डिपकार्डीचं अस्तित्व आता धोक्यात आलंय.
अगदी छोटंसं जीवनक्रम आणि आढळ क्षेत्र असणारी ही प्रजात वाचवण्यासाठी शर्तीचे प्रयत्न होणं गरजेचं आहे. नाहीतर जगात फक्त कोकणात 2 महिन्यांसाठी फुलणाऱ्या या दुर्मिळ प्रजातीला आपल्याला मुकावं लागेल. तुम्हाला आमचा हा व्हिडिओ कसा वाटला आम्हाला नक्की कळवा. धन्यवाद.
What did you see most in this video? Biodiversity. But biodiversity is quite vast, no? What in it? What are the main things in this movie? I know there are some small little creatures that came. But what is the thing that you'll take away? What did you see the most?
Ecological balance.
Wow. Ecological balance. What else? Like, what was the predominant thing in the film? Nature. Correct. Endemic. Correct. Right. Plants. Right. You saw lots of plants. Yeah, you saw flowers. Correct. Now, what Aparna is going to tell us is why this is important to see. Usually we'll see films about tigers and all, we'll get happy, which we should see. But why these films are important? Why should you see plants? What are the special things about these plants? And why we should worry about or not worry about where they live, how they grow? That's what we'll talk about with Aparna. Cool? Yes. So some of these plants that you saw are found only in this region, in the entire world, if I'm not mistaken, that's Aparna, right? Yeah. So if you can, okay, first of all, first things first. Did you hear this word sadas in the video? What is a sada? Let's first start with that. We'll context set first, okay? Aparna, can you tell us a little bit about what a sada is?
Yeah, so sada is actually a Marathi word. I think it is used also in Konkani in the same manner. It's a very special word. It has many meanings. One of the meaning is alone, or one who is not married. one who's not, or barren. Sadly, the same word is used for a habitat which is far from barren. You must have seen, like, millions of flowers blooming and little creatures on it. So it's a in a geological term, it's what is called a ferricrete, which is a plateau, a rocky plateau of laterite stone. So laterite, I'm sure you may have seen it in some of the houses as a decorative stone, reddish.
Do you know what a laterite stone is? Does anyone know? How does laterite stone, how do they form? Aparna, can you tell us?
Yeah, so laterite, if you have been to any of the coastal areas or Kerala, you will find this red soil everywhere. That is the lateritic soil. So it's probably the only stone which forms soil first and then becomes stone. Okay, this is something very interesting. So you know that most of our India is formed out of igneous volcanic eruptions. We have different types of volcanic rocks. Here is granite, Maharashtra side is basalt. But after they formed, they went through a process of metamorphosis. That it changed. So it's a metamorphic rock which is laterite. So what happened is there was a period of heavy rains. And everything that was soluble from the rock itself got leached out. And what remained had a lot of aluminium and iron. That's why it's red. Now that was the lateritic soil that formed. So it was reddish soil which you see in many of the higher altitude areas as well. Then we entered a phase of dryness. And I'm talking about, almost 40 million years ago. So we went through from 60 to 40 million years. When we were coming to our present position as India, we were going through cycles of heavy rains, dryness, heavy rains, dryness.
Sorry, 1 second. Can you just hold the mic little close? Can everybody hear? It seems there's some people having a slight problem.
Back.
Oh, you can hear? All right. Sorry.
So that's when the laterite formed, and that's why it's reddish in color. And here, when you see it as sada, is basically a very hard platform of laterite, which means that after it's formed, there won't be more soil formed on it. It is very hard. You can cut it by a machine and use it for your houses or something, then it hardens even more. So if you see some of the older houses of laterite, say in places like Bangalore, and I think even in Kurg you see it, right? They are very, very well weathered houses. So that is a natural process. This is what is laterite.
And a lot of these plants that are endemic here, they obviously benefit from this rock.
Yes, so because it is so hard, it has certain advantages and disadvantages. It's so hard that hardly any soil forms on top of that. You will find a little bit of humus forming, which is not good for large trees. So large trees will not grow easily, which means that there is a open, free platform for all the smaller things to come in. Right. Otherwise, forest would have taken over. But here you find all the very small ephemeral plants, all the monsoonal plants, which can grow in this very thin layer of soil and humus. And that's why you see great diversity of smaller herbaceous plants. In addition to that, you will also see smaller animals.
Correct.
Because yeah, you saw the centipede with its babies, you saw the scorpion. So it's a very rocky area. All of them are very happy. There's a special gecko which lives on this. So this is entirely a habitat which is meant for smaller stuff. And because of the way it is formed, and it's not formed anywhere else, they have been living here for these many years. They are like on an island. They can't move out of it. They are very common there. They are abundant. If you walk, you will see maybe 2 saw-scaled vipers. You will see 10 scorpions when you are walking. But you move out of the laterite landscape, you won't see them. That's why they are so rare. And that's why you keep finding new species there.
So when you say that they can't move out of this landscape, because of course everything becomes an island. Also the difference between then, it's a different type of forest, right? When we think of forest, we think of what? We think of trees. We think of big canopies. We don't think of smaller spaces like this, large spaces like this with smaller things in it. And I think this is why probably that they are also largely known as wastelands. what she said earlier, sadas, which is a really sad, meaning to it. I mean, I'm quite upset to hear how, it's called so barren when we saw so much life in it. But is the reason that basically all these things, the flowering and all happens in the monsoon, right?
Yes.
So in the summer, is it largely dormant? Is that why they are called wastelands? So wastelands are usually marked by, actually this is by the government as well. They are actually labeled as wastelands. And when something is a wasteland, when you think that yahan to kuch nahi ugega, you can do anything you want with it, which is a little dangerous, no? For all these animals that you saw, if something grows on it without any thought process, if something is built on it, that's a problem. So I think supporting grasslands and not calling them wastelands is one of Aparna's primary work goals, I would say.
So actually, if you go into the story of wasteland, the term doesn't exist in Indian words, This sada meaning, being alone and all that, is just colloquial. But wasteland, the term got put into our heads in British times. So for them, anything that is not useful for them, for growing maybe cash crops, for growing plantations, that's useless. People have been using it, so it's not at all waste. So you saw the biodiversity, but these are also actively used by people for agriculture, for fishing, for grazing animals. So there are hardly, no local person will dare to call them wastelands. But this term sadly has stuck to us. Although we got freedom, 1947, our government has continued with this. Successive governments, scientists have always been saying, let's change it. Let's look at it from an Indian perspective, and let's look at why we started calling such a beautiful landscape as waste. This is, for desert also they call the same, for many of the ravine areas is the same. So it's time that we take a good look at our own landscapes. In case of Sada, though, it has been a much bigger problem, because people would like to get to the stone by quarrying, or like to get to the bauxite ore which is below the laterite surface. So it's kind of in everybody's favor to keep calling it waste. Local people are objecting because local people know, but the mine owners and the government bodies which are getting revenue from that, they are not too keen on changing the term.
Why are local people for it? What do they get from it?
So local people, if you look at Konkan landscape or even up to Kerala landscape, these communities have settled there several years ago. Documented history will go back up to at least 14-15 generations. There is archaeological history which goes to 2000, 3000, even 5000 years old. And these are landscapes where people have settled down. There are places where agriculture has been started on sadas. Little terraces are made, very hard process, but they are made. There are some special varieties of rice, special varieties of pulses which are grown there for generations. These are most ideal landscape for the pastorals. So there are communities of dhangars, in Marathi we call it dhangars, who have their whole dhangar vada, a basti, right on the sada. So all around them is this grass. I remember this new airport in Mopa. I visited Mopa in 2014. Before it was airport, it was a sada. And we were called there as scientists to give our opinion by the local community. And I walked in there and the grass was this high. You can't imagine. I mean, you think there's no soil, but the grass is so high. And the people were saying that government is ready to pay us money to move out. But we have, about 1,000 sheep. We have 400-500 cows. Where will we graze them? How will we get the grass? This sada is what is keeping us for so many years. There is water in it. It doesn't look like it has water. But there's plenty of water. You saw that.
Yeah.
And there are
it doesn't seem like a landscape that would have so much water. It looks really...
But interestingly, the laterite has got crevices and subterranean drainage, we call it. So below the surface, there are crevices. So all the monsoon water that falls on laterite is kind of soaked up and stored there. It's like a open water storage tank.
Wow.
So there are places where people know how to cut the laterite. Just a small one, small hole is made, and the water keeps seeping in.
Wow, so steam can actually run out of that.
So it could be, the hole could be just of this size, but it gives water perennial. 12 months you will see it.
So something that is deemed useless basically provides grazing opportunities for cattle, water for the people who live around it, and of course otherwise they use plants that grow there for various needs.
I think for a long time we never asked the people living in one place. We would call a scientist from abroad, we would call somebody from other saying, look at it, if that person has not lived and experienced that, that person is unlikely to know about
How
it.
will we know?
But people are now being, here I was so happy to see that Murier was talking about it, because he knows every day he's walking on the plateau. He knows where his village water is coming from.
Right. One interesting thing that, guys, actually it's quite informal, so you can ask your questions as well. I'm just asking mine, but if you have questions about the sadas, you just can. I'll just ask this one thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they are islands. कि यहाँ पे जो grow होता है, whatever grows on a sada cannot grow, it's endemic. It becomes an island and it cannot grow anywhere else, which I understand. I understand because the soil is like that, the rock is like that, the plateau itself is like that, I get it. But we know about pollinators. So if something can probably take something from here and grow somewhere else, is that not a possibility for the plant to survive elsewhere? Or is it just going to grow in this one place?
The thing is, it's like the plant has grown there, has adapted to a very harsh condition. Okay, so it is comfortable there, it has the right kind of soil mineral composition, it has the right kind of pollinator, it has the right kind of climate, the sunlight, everything is comfortable. Any change in that is not tolerable. So because these conditions, it's like let's say a fluke of nature that they have come together here and they are not outside, the chance of that plant trying to go outside is also not possible. Many of the plants here, they have special pollinators, because if you see the flowers, even for this, they will remain only for maybe 2 weeks. Heavy monsoon, heavy winds, fog, which pollinator is going to go there? So it's only a specialized pollinator. Only a certain bees would do that, certain moths would do that. There are plants which have moths coming only at night. So not only is the plant special, the pollinators are special. When the seeds are formed, they have adapted to grow in very harsh condition again. They have to find a place. So there are some grass seeds where actually, roll about and find crevices. Some seeds are taken by the ants and put into crevices. These are all symbiotic associations which will not be outside. Most of them are not designed for long range dispersal. It's not like, some birds are coming, eating and coming back. These are this small. So it will be only locally dispersed and locally grown.
So it has its own ecosystem here only, which is perfect for it, and anything else that goes haywire, then that's a problem for the species entirely.
Entirely, and
That's quite dire.
another interesting is, they in their, like in Marathi we say ki त्यांच्या मुलखात राजा, that means in their own locality they are kings and queens. Okay, so other plants can't grow on plateau. The climate is so harsh. If you stand on a plateau in summer, you will be burned in 15 minutes. Like I had to figure out which cream to use so that I don't actually peel off, That's the first thing you learn, that UVB is so high that everything, your eyes start watering, you get all red and all that. So these plants their seeds have to survive in this. Other plants can't. So they have very less competition where they are. So you don't see them in ones and twos. You see them in millions. If we see that Dipkadi film, maybe we should now. So the flower film that we have, another one, has a very interesting story. So this flower was described first by a British botanist sometime in 1860s, 70s. Since then, again from Konkan only, it was never seen afterwards. Never seen means nobody had reported. All the scientists were in Bombay and Pune, they never went to Konkan to see it. So in about 140 years, there were just 3 or 4 reports of it. When I first went to Ratnagiri, which is a town. This was around 2000. Okay. And when I first saw this species, it was growing in somebody's backyard. And I had only known of this as a very rare species and very endangered one because nobody sees it. So I asked the local person, he said, why are you, looking at it like you have seen some ghost? It's always been there. You go around Ratnagiri, you will see in everybody's houses. Even today, there are pockets where it is in plenty. But we had to tell people that you are lucky to have it.
Right.
You go from Ratnagiri to Satara, you will never see it. You go just 20 kilometers out of your locality, it's not there.
And in the whole world, not
In the
just
whole
there.
world.
Nowhere
Yeah,
else except for
it's
that
like
little
this,
patch.
absolutely, this little patch of Konkan where you see it, nowhere else. So people get used to the abundance of this, and only when they go out or outsiders come in, they realize it's so unique.
So this kind of storytelling, I think, would also be quite powerful, right? If people are coming and shooting like a plant, they'll be like, "Kya hi dekh rahe hai? Like, why are they coming all the way here to shoot this little thing?" But then that is a way to tell a story, right? That you realize that people are literally coming from outside to look at this small thing. So
I
that's
think
also quite important.
when Akshay was doing it, people were so shocked that he is taking all this, and they showed him many other uses also.
Exactly.
I have never seen that use that he had, no? That garland making. Maybe
Yes.
we should.
So we'll play one more short film. It's another 5 to 6 minute film. This is another. Do you want to ask your question now, or did you want to wait for the film to have? You can ask. It's fine.
Okay. So Kars Plateau, that got declared as a World Natural Heritage Site as part of the Western Ghats subcluster. It is at higher altitude, 1200 meters. Yeah. Well, these areas where we are working, they have some unique biological and cultural features. So they have petroglyphs, which are very large engravings on the rock, which are pretty unique. Very recently, Government of India has put up a proposal for World Heritage Site. And our work is to give a national legal support to it by trying out biodiversity heritage site. So those are possibilities, but many of these are private lands. So we don't want to go into the protected area because, people's use will get affected. And in fact, biodiversity and people have lived here. So it's only that if we can change some of the management, it will allow people to continue to do their uses and keep the biodiversity. There was somebody other asking a question.
Was there another question, or we'll watch that? There. That's
What is the way forward? So way forward is something that we are doing right now. We have a project. We have identified about 11 sites which have very high unique values, which should be declared as biodiversity heritage site. The proposal is already there. We are just creating the maps and the management plan for all that. If that happens, it gets a protection under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002, which is a very big thing. Second part of it is what would be people's reaction to this is that in our area at least people are very keen to have the sadas protected because they are dependent on it. They don't want any big refinery and any big kind of mega projects to come there, so they are very supportive of conservation. We need to have certain social things, ecological things and legal things in place. All these go hand in hand. When we started working on sadas, we have this what we call as a rock outcrop network. In 2012, we formed it, and we have been working on various small places. And each place has its own unique advantages and problems. So we are working with local organizations to do the work ahead. Thank you. There's one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Just want to add that along with the ways of marking wetlands or grasslands as wastelands, in Tamil Nadu, for instance, those kind of areas are called as Poromboku, which is actually a reference to commons. The commons were during the colonial period marked out as wastelands, and so the perception also changed amongst the public that these are wastelands, and so commons were converted into wastelands through this kind of indoctrination. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there are so many unique things in India which have all been put as wasteland that we need to do something seriously about this. There are ephemeral wetlands of similar nature in Uttar Kannada. In fact, Karnataka CES, ISC group, they have done a very nice paper on it, on how they should be protected. But I don't know whether legally it has moved ahead. There is one plateau in Rivona, by the way, which again is proposed for biodiversity heritage site, Goa. Yes, so if that works, we can have a chain of all these protected little sites, each one unique. So, in Andaman, we had declared all the islands as sanctuaries because each one was unique. Same way for the terrestrial habitat islands, we need to think about it.
It's really interesting what you also said, in the sense that when there is a certain tag that is given to an ecosystem, then that becomes something that is part of, it becomes part of our vocabulary. And I think that is actually dangerous, not just for, something like this, but in general, where there are no trees. I think, and I write a lot about coastal wildlife and coasts and, animals that live on the intertidal. And I've so many times come across people who think, kuch hi nahi, reti to hai. It's just sand. And, sand itself is made up of so much life is even in that little bit of thing, but we don't, actually, if our eye can't see it immediately, we are not able to see it as something that is important or vital or even worth acknowledging.
So one of the things that might be an area of work for many people is to build this equal literacy about these kind of spaces and to recover the commons.
Correct.
Culturally, the understanding of commons is more concretized.
Yes.
It would help more people to own it.
Absolutely.
Sense of belief and
Which is why I think outreach is key, right? I mean, you fire from every cylinder you have, and then outreach becomes something that becomes a way that people talk to each other about and say, "Hey, did you know this is something that is right here in front of us?"
I think one of the good things that we are now seeing in case of many of these habitat is that people have started talking about ecosystem services. What are the provisional services? What are people getting out of it? So there is a whole science of that. One of the important thing is cultural service. There are so many places here and on many of the rocky areas which are shrines which are 300, 400 years old. And people can give you all the history of when it was formed and who made it and everything. With culture comes a certain kind of pride and identity. And generally, when Western conservationists speak, they talk about payments. What is the economic aspect of it? Can you start tourism and can people get money? I think in India we are very different. I think for us, pride, love, all these non-tangible values can make a lot of difference to how people view things. So maybe we should be, documenting and talking also about it. Non-politically, of course, but...
But that is also interesting, and Megha's giving me like a little... So just last point I wanted to just... because what you said about ecological heritage also, right? That's what you mean. That things that are going on for millions of years, it's not ke kal ka hoga hai, aaj ka hoga hai, it's been there forever in that sense. Ever means a really long time. And then I think if that is something that we can put into our mind frame. So it's not just about what this landscape can do for you. So I started asking her, what is the human use? How are they using it? How are people using it? But as she so rightly pointed out, that's not the only thing. It's not just about what an ecosystem can do for you. It's also that it is worth preserving because of what she said right now, the ecological heritage of it. That's the word you use, right?
So,
the phrase.
Heritage. So we were discussing while coming here of how we plan to discuss, and why do we want Mona Lisa's painting to exist? I'm never going to see it. Picasso's work, I may not even admire it, but as humans, we think of it as pinnacle of certain bit of art. Why do we want Taj Mahal and Hampi to remain as they are? Because that's part of what humans have achieved, and our highly evolved artistic sense and architectural prowess, we can show that. I think when we see ecosystems like this, they are 40 million to 60 million years old. Wow. This is something which nature has created. Each species of it is a different creation, and we can go on endlessly, viewing it. I think that itself is a heritage, natural heritage
That should be enough, basically, to do the protection that it requires.
Absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, time is up, guys. If you have any last questions and whatever, Aparna is
there was
going
one
to be
question
here.
There was some question?
We are going to be here. Aparna is going to be
okay,
around
yeah.
anyway. So
Questions even outside. And even within the hall, feel free to badger them. They are really here with us till the end of the day. And we are almost at the end of the day. So really thank you all for your patience.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you
If
so
you want to
much.
see more of these films, then they are on YouTube. So if you could just look at the Habitats Trust and MyMTB, and you'll see them. So there are all of these. There are pangolins, otters, all of these beautiful animals as well, and much more from the sadas. So yeah.
Yeah.
you can
So
take a look.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Aparna. That was amazing.
Panelists.